Councillor Coburn and Deputy Mayor Pringle, can you hear us? I see nods. Perfect. I will now call this meeting to order on February 14th at 5 p.m. Those of you who aren't here missed out on your chocolates. We will start with the land acknowledgement statement being read by CAO Niall Lobley.
Good evening. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge with respect the history, spirituality, culture of the Anishinaabe, the people of the Three Fires known as Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi Nation, who have inhabited this land from time immemorial. And further give thanks to the Chippewas of Saugeen, the Chippewas of Nawash, now known as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, as the traditional keepers of this land. We also recognize the Métis and Inuit, whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. May we all, as treaty people, live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship with all of its diverse peoples. Some notes for my personal reflection. So this evening's agenda includes a discussion and I hope the passing of the 2024 budget. This reflects the township's commitment to action over coming months and years. The passing of a budget reminds me of why public service is so important to me, the ability to be in a role which works to serve in the public interest, and that is part of a mechanism that serves the greater good. There's also a time to review the actions and to see if we are doing all we can to achieve that greater good. As I review this year's budget, not only is it a commitment to action, embedded within this budget is another aspect of public service which I had not appreciated until several years into my career, that we are better together and that the township delivers better services and is more relevant to the community we serve when we work in collaboration and partnership with the other tiers of government, funding partners, commercial and business partners, and perhaps more than any other with the community partners. We deliver more and we are better at it for all when we work together. This evening's agenda also includes a bylaw that reflects a personal honour for me. It may be largely administrative in nature. The world will still turn the same way after this bylaw is passed, but it marks for me the beginning of a significant body of work and a team that I'm proud to be part of. These remind me and highlight the need we have as an organisation to be better, to commit to action with Indigenous community and members that we serve and on whose traditional lands we occupy, to work in partnership and collaboration to achieve a better tomorrow and to start that process early on and on a continuous basis, to reflect on the significance and impact that we can have on community and to make a personal commitment to find opportunities to establish, build and enhance relationships. I am committed as we start to 2024 to establishing and growing relationships where possible, to seek to work in increasing partnership and collaboration with local Indigenous communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Those words are very true. Thank you. Moving on to approval of the agenda. The recommendation is that the agenda be approved as presented. Are there any additions to the agenda before we go ahead? Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Mayor Carlton. I would.
We cannot hear you. Harley's just making an adjustment in settings here.
Can you hear me now?
Can't hear you. Just. Try again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, perfect, good. Thank you, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Carlton. I would like to add a brief discussion about our CAO evaluation process. I don't think it'll be a long discussion, but I would appreciate that being added to the agenda today because we do have some deadlines coming up in that regard.
Okay, so we will add that. New business? I think it'll have to go on tonight because we've been asked to have everybody's input in by Friday. Okay, so we'll add that under new business. Okay, just give me a minute to get this written down or I will forget. Okay. Thank you. So the recommendation then will be that the agenda be approved as amended unless there are other additions to the agenda. Seeing none, could I have a mover and a seconder then, please? Councillor Day, Councillor Winters. I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, you may declare at any time if one should arise throughout the meeting. Minutes of previous meetings. We'll start with the January 17th. Recommendation that the minutes of the council meeting held on January 17th, 2024 be adopted. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Schuldeis, Deputy Mayor Pringle. Is there any discussion? Could I have a mover and a second? Sorry, I'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And the next one is that the minutes of the special council meeting held on January 30th, 2024 be adopted. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Coburn, Councillor Schuldeis. Is there any discussion? Councillor Winters, go ahead.
I was reading the minutes last night. I just trying to recollect. I think there's far too many staff present on the minutes than we're actually in the meeting. I don't recall our manager of infrastructure and engineering, our manager of waste and fleet. I can't recall whether our communication specialist was in the room at that point. I did quickly try to go back through our YouTube videos last night. I didn't see them personally there, and trying to scan like the screens, I didn't see them logged in remotely either. So just for clarification. And I have another, I think we need to clarify one of the statements I made in regards to the concession 21, where I said we need to look at other options as opposed to just doing recycled asphalt, cold in place recycling. We need to look at surface treatment program. I think the minutes reflect that if we just change the name, I'd be okay with it. That's not really what I'm trying to reflect in that statement. I don't know how we can kind of clarify that a bit. See if I can find that here. Page 3.
Yeah, page 3.
Yeah. To the cold in place asphalt recycling project referred to as surface treatment in all future project materials and publications. I think the intent is that we look at other options that are more cost effective so we can do more with the same volume of funds than just change the name of it.
Carly.
Thank you, Mayor Carlton. Through you, the attendance is actually correct. Those staff members were present virtually.
Okay, thank you.
And I would be happy to make the other suggested amendment in terms of your statement regarding cold and place recycling.
Go ahead.
To you, Mayor Carlton. Councillor Winters, just for your assurance, and I quite agree, we can tweak the minutes to reflect it, but staff took the intent that you shared, so we took it exactly the way you just iterated it.
So do we, as amended now? Okay, so we'll change that to being those minutes are as amended. And that was Councillor Coburn moving, and I think so, Councillor Schuldeis. Are both of you in favor of that? Okay, I will call the vote then. All in favor? Carried. Announcements. Are there any announcements? Go ahead, Councillor Day.
In February, we honor Black History Month, so let's take a moment to recognize the incredible contributions and enduring legacy of the Black community members who have been an integral part of Grey County's history since its early days. Grey County became a popular destination for Black families escaping enslavement, as Owen Sound was, for many, a final stop on the Underground Railroad. As Black families moved into the area, they settled, farmed, and started businesses. One such settlement, Negro Creek, south of Williamsford, was home to more than 50 families. In the late 1880s, many families settled in the Owen Sound area, bearing the nickname Mudtown on the Lower East Side, named after the mudslides and runoff from the escarpment each spring that caused the roads and sidewalks to become covered in mud each year. Many staff worked in the Polson shipyard and lived on the nearby streets, with prominent Black families such as the Douglas, Bowie, Scott, Morton, and Earls calling this area home. Indeed, what is today 8th Street in Owen Sound, it initially bore the name Douglas Street, commemorating the first Black settlers to this area. descendants of these settlers to continue to live in the region and contribute positively to the community. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I have an announcement as well, one not maybe as pleasant as that one. Georgian Bluffs is a small community, and schools are at the heart of every community. It is with great sadness that we heard that late last week, a grade 3 student at Keppel Sarawak, Duke Nash, passed away after battling a rare genetic condition, X-ALD, for which he was diagnosed with last spring. Duke's brother Boo also attended Keppel Sarawak School, and their mother is part of the staff team as well. Our thoughts and prayers are with all members of the community impacted by this tragic loss, and particularly with the Nash family at this hard time. We also think of the students, staff, and wider community of Keppel Sarawak School who are experiencing this loss as it is felt across the community. For anyone affected by this loss, free resources are available, including at Homewood Health on 1-866-585-0445, provided by Wellness Together. Our sympathies go out to the family at this time. Are there any other announcements? Okay, seeing none. There are no public hearings. We have no delegations this evening. I will note for anyone listening that if you wish to delegate or appear before council, if it's regarding an item on the agenda, make written application to the clerk by 3 p.m. the day of the meeting, and to register, go to georgianbluffs.ca/delegations or call the clerk's office at 519-376-2729, extension 603. And if it's on items not on the agenda, then the same contact information, but you must contact the clerk by the Thursday preceding the meeting you wish to speak at. Moving on to the consent agenda. Are there any items there that anyone wishes to pull from the consent agenda? Seeing none? Go ahead.
I'd like to pull 9.3.2 Sarnia City Council carbon tax.
Let me get that written down. Councillor Winters?
I really don't want to pull it, but I'm wondering at some point tonight if we could talk about the East Linton drinking water and some of the leaks that I think have been repaired in the past few weeks. I think there's some good news stories that we're making some headway there that I think we need to talk about.
Okay, perhaps we could add that later in the agenda under unfinished business. Does it fit there?
We could do it there through you, Mayor Carlton, or we could do it right here.
Could you
I
right
could
now?
do it right here.
Okay.
That makes sense. Actually, no, I think, yes, I think that would be, yeah.
Okay. All right, so the recommendation is that Council of the Township of Georgian Bluffs adopt the consent agenda for information as circulated, less items 9.3.2 and 9.5.2. Could I have a mover and that all items contained therein are hereby approved? Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Schuldeis, Councillor Winters. Is there any discussion on just the items that are on the consent agenda that we're moving? We'll pull the others and talk after. I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Okay, so 9.3.2, Councillor Schuldeis.
Thank you. So Sarnia City Council wrote a letter to the Prime Minister regarding their adopted resolution from January 15th about canceling the carbon tax. This can be found on page 53 of tonight's agenda for any of those watching or that are interested in seeing this. Sarnia City Council goes on to state that this carbon tax is financially hurting their citizens at a time when affordability concerns are at an all-time high. They go on to say that this tax flows through from producers to transporters to the grocery store floor all the way down to their citizens. Sarnia asks for their council resolution to be copied to other municipalities for consideration. I will echo them by agreeing that this carbon tax does very little to reduce pollution and emission, but puts financial and inflationary pressure onto taxpayers. I would like to put a motion forward echoing support to Sarnia City Council and asking for a cancellation to this carbon tax. Thank you.
Thank you. And I am going to turn to staff for how we proceed with that at this point. Do I need to get a seconder on this item?
Thank you, Mayor Carlton. Through you, I would be happy to handle this letter of support the way we have handled them in the past. So if there is a desire to do so, the clerk's department would be happy to submit a letter of support on behalf of council with a seconder to Councillor Schuldeis's motion.
Okay, so do I have a seconder on this item? Councillor Winters, is there any further discussion? Councillor Coburn?
For me personally, I don't know that I can vote on this one because I feel like it's a very partisan issue. And as a municipal councilor, I try not to be partisan, but also I don't have a complete enough knowledge about the carbon tax and the impact that it's having. And so for me, without more information and delving a little deeper into this, I don't feel comfortable voting one way or the other. So I'm going to abstain, which we all know that will be recorded as a nay, but I did want you to understand why. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion on the item? Councillor Day?
I think Councillor Coburn worded that quite eloquently. I feel like the folks from Sarnia have laid out some common concerns about the carbon tax and there isn't necessarily a broad enough view to make a decision about this federal project. So I would abstain from voting tonight as well until there was a little bit more information that we could consider and discuss if we decided to go down that path.
Okay, any other discussion or comments? Deputy Mayor Pringle?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Carlton. I'm not in total disagreement with other two councillors there. I'm not sure either that if, we were to say we don't want carbon tax anymore, where's the money going to come from? It's going to come from somewhere to support the rest of what goes on with the provincial and the federal government, or the federal government on the carbon tax. So I'm a little hesitant to say, yeah, let's scrap it, because the money's got to come from somewhere. As we all know, we're in tough shape as it is down to the municipal level. So yeah, I'm a little hesitant to vote for getting rid of it too.
Okay, so taking into consideration the comments, is it something perhaps we want to try and get more information on, or is everybody ready to vote on the issue now? Go ahead, Councillor Schuldeis.
I'm voting in favor of supporting. Yep.
Okay, then I will call the vote. All those in favor? And opposed? Okay, so that one is lost. Okay, next item, 9.5.2, East Linton Drinking Water System.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, on this one, so Councillor Winters rightly said there's been some recent successes in terms of the East Linton system. As we discussed at the back end of last year, the system is aging in its infrastructure, and there are quite high levels of loss from the system through leaks. There has been work started over the recent weeks, recent months, in terms of trying to identify those leaks. Two fairly large, substantial leaks have been identified, and I believe one has definitely been repaired. You actually may be ahead of me on the second one. I know the second one was in process of being repaired. So the first leak was just off Grey Road 1. The second leak is on Indian Acres Road. Both, well, the first leak that was repaired was a fairly substantial leak. The second leak was suspected to be as substantial, if not more substantial, than the first leak. And both would have reflected a fairly significant chunk of the losses that we're experiencing from the system. So assuming both leaks were fixed, that would be a noticeable decrease in the losses that we're experiencing from that system. So the work on leak detection, which remains a priority and supported through this year's budget, would continue. But certainly finding big individual leaks is a big chunk out of the overall loss that we experience in the system. And so, as Councillor Winters indicated, some success for our partner in this one, Aqua, in terms of identifying those leaks and getting on to repairing them. And thankfully, we had a fairly easy winter so far, so they've been able to work on that during the winter season. I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add into that, Councillor Winters.
No, I just think it was important that, the people watching and the people on the Eastern water system realize that we are working towards that. We are finding some significant leaks. Aqua is doing what they are paid to do. I'm not 100% up to date on the second leak. I know they were planning on doing a repair. I don't know whether that's been done or not. But it is the old infrastructure that is in place. It is some of the metal parts that are actually deteriorating due to age and corrosion that are causing some of those issues. So I just thought it was a good news that, we should let the users of that system know we're working towards it. We're making some success.
Good, and thank you for bringing that up. We need a mover and a seconder then to accept that report. So, sorry, Councillor Day, go ahead.
Thank you. I really appreciate the update. And when the numbers become available for how much water is being kept in the system, that would be really interesting to hear.
Yep, staff, through you, Mayor Carlton, staff would be happy to bring that information back, and we'll flag it perhaps as part of the next distribution, the next water reports that we bring to council.
Okay, so if I could have a mover and a seconder, Councillor Day, Councillor Shouldice, all in favor. That is carried. Correspondence, item 11.1, letter to council. Sorry, I need to get back to my agenda. Letter to council from the Association of Ontario Road Supervisors, potential municipal equipment operator course. Does any member wish to comment there? Councillor Day.
This feels like unless there's something I'm not seeing, this feels like something that would be worthwhile supporting. Any college training program that will prepare youth to work in municipal settings, including Georgian Bluffs, is helpful. And if there's no course already doing that in Ontario, then it would be a wise one for us to support, in my opinion. But there might be folks who know more about this than I do, and I'd love to hear some opinions.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Mayor Carlton. Councillor Day took the words out of my mouth. I would have said exactly what she said, word for word. And I just wondered if there are folks in the room who might be more knowledgeable, who might want to comment on this one. Otherwise, I'd be in support of it. So I'm looking to Councillor Winters, who has some experience in this area, and perhaps others, as well as any staff members who are with us this evening that might have comment on it as well.
Councillor Winters, go ahead.
Yeah, I've read it, and I have, I'm always supportive of training opportunities for anybody, and I think there is a need to figure out how to get younger generations interested in the municipal field and bring them on. I'm reluctant, though, that I'm not so sure that I think there's one course that fits the needs for every municipal organization as a trainee. I mean, typically as a hiring person involved in municipal operations, you looked at different aspects that brought everybody together as a team. And I'm a little skeptical of this. Hopefully the program could be developed in such a way that the curriculum had enough parameters in it that brought well-rounded people and not just focus that we just do one thing in municipalities. So I'm a little skeptical. I think you look at experience when you hire in the municipal world, bringing people with no experience of just taking a course and said, here, away you go. I'm sitting on the fence. I really am. I think there's a need, but I'm not so sure that the needs being captured here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Through you, Mayor Carlton, thank you for the conversation. I mean, I think this is an excellent organisation. It's an organisation, in fact, I was wearing their jacket today. So this is an organisation that we certainly support, an organisation who our staff are aware of and work with. I think I'd echo to some extent what Councillor Winters has indicated is we're able to get trained staff, and we do take training, and we don't necessarily need all of our staff to be trained exactly the same way. And so, I think there is definitely some validity to different people having different experiences and have learned skills and acquired their experience in different ways. That being said, I would note that heavy equipment training is expensive. And so if there was opportunities through a program such as this to be able to access some of that heavy equipment training at a more effective rate, a reduced rate or a subsidized rate, I think that is something that we would be keen to lean on, particularly if that continued to be delivered through local training providers and local networks and not requiring staff to go away and take weeks away from the workplace in centralized locations. So I can see some value to this, but I would agree with Councillor Winters that the benefits that we gain from having staff with different skills, different experiences, having come from different places, is certainly something which we benefit from here. The only other thing I would note is gaining staff with an interest in public sector work is certainly becoming more challenging. So like many others, we face recruitment challenges, we face retention challenges for a range of different reasons. I wouldn't say that training is the magic bullet that's going to solve that problem, but having more training and having more efficient and effective training that can be delivered at a cost-effective manner is never something that we would say no to. So I don't think it's an urgent pressure for us, but I think if there was some support for this, it would be something that I would be quite happy to see us put our name against.
Thank you, Councillor Day.
I wear my other hat briefly. I'm thinking about it from the perspective of graduating 17-year-olds who don't have work experience. I'm going to guess, and please correct me if I'm wrong, those folks without a lot of life and work experience just yet may not be hireable for some of the positions.
Without getting into a bigger debate of really what the problems are in Ontario with trying to attract operators and drivers, it comes down to insurance. You can get a truck license at 18 years old, $10,000 course. You can't get hired and you can't get insurance until you're at least 25 years old. And most of your insurance companies will look at you and say, without 3 years experience, we're not going to insure you. How do you get 3 years insurance experience if you can't get insurance? That's the problem in Ontario. And I have to say that every year they make it more onersome on the licensed drivers to maintain their driver's license. They make it harder for young people to get their driver's license. That's where the problem lies in Ontario. Everybody wants to give somebody a chance to do it. But when it's physically restrictive as an employer, you just can't do it. And we struggle with it on a day-to-day basis in the private sector. And that's really where it is. If you could get insurance on an 18-year-old, you grab them out of high school. You would grab the individuals that can easily be influenced, can be trained, and you'd put them to work. But when you let them migrate out of high school for 7 years before they can actually get insurance and get into the workforce, that's where the problem lies. They go elsewhere.
And again, through you, Mayor Carleton, I'd echo exactly what Councillor Winters has just iterated in terms of equipment operators. It's challenging because you do have that gap where they're lost. One of the good things about what we're trying to achieve here, and certainly through the last few months, you've seen the transition in our operations, in the way in which we structure our operations crew, is we recognise that, and so we have created the 2 tiers of operator 1 and operator 2 with the intention that we do have opportunities for people to jump in and join our team, even if they can't necessarily operate all the pieces of equipment at this point, with the hope that they get their feet warm, enjoy working for a municipality and in the public sector, and then can learn those skills as they go along. But certainly, as Councillor Winters indicates, it can be very challenging to gain that skill set at that point where you're just leaving school and looking at potential careers.
Councillor Day.
I wanted to add one more piece to the puzzle. And if there is a college program, then it would allow high schools to work with the specialist high skills majors programs to prepare students for that college program. And through the specialist high skills majors program, students get significant certifications. And I ran one in the environment, so I can't speak for all the training sessions that they get, but I know that working at Heights is a popular one for the high school students. And there's things related to transportation and manufacturing, and I'll stop talking there, and you should talk to our the co-op departments in high schools to get more, and the SHSM departments in high schools to get more information. But if without the college program, I don't know that the high schools can do anything to prepare the students for the municipal world.
So the comment I think I would have here is that I think this proposed motion that they've offered us doesn't cover all aspects. And I wonder if it's one that we need to, because the insurance is a huge piece of it. And do we need to be putting that type of information in there if we want to go forward with this motion?
So hearing the conversation through you, Mayor Carlton, I don't know if this would be, if there was a member of council that so wished, perhaps staff could be directed to take this motion away, review it, bring back a staff comment on it, and perhaps an amended motion that might support, might meet the same endpoint of support, but be more appropriately worded to reflect the challenges that we experience as a township.
What does everyone think of that idea? Councillor Winters.
I think we're spending too much time on the ask. I think the ask is, will you support it? And I think we should support some training that, formalizes, especially if AORS is willing to do it. But I don't think you should leave here today thinking that's going to solve all your problems, because it's not. It'll give another opportunity. I don't anywhere in here read that it's a college course or a year-long course. It's just another course that AORS wants to do that's provincially recognized. It'll likely fall under the road superintendent certification. I think we're spending far too much time on it. I think it's something that, hey, we should give our support behind it. It doesn't cost us anything. And there may be some benefit to us, but it's not the end all to be all.
Okay, so I have the actual notice of motion here in front of me that they have sent. So I will read that and then get a mover and a seconder. So whereas municipal public works departments from across the province of Ontario provide invaluable services to our communities, ensuring the health and safety of all residents. And whereas if it was not for our municipal public works employees from across the province of Ontario, maintaining our public road systems, our communities would not be able to function as emergency personnel, could not respond to calls, school buses could not get our children to school, residents would not be able to get to work, school, or appointments, and many more basic functions would not be able to happen. And whereas municipal public works departments are already feeling the impacts of a labor shortage, which will only be exacerbated over the next 3 to 5 years, which will cause levels of service municipalities are able to provide to ensure the health and safety of our residents to decrease. And whereas there is currently no provincial-wide course that properly trains potential municipal public works employees, specifically relating to municipal heavy equipment. Therefore, be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bluffs hereby supports the work of the Association of Ontario Road Supervisors to develop a municipal equipment operator course to address this issue, and that the Township of Georgian Bluffs calls on the Province of Ontario's Ministry of Labour, Training, Immigration and Skilled Trades to fully fund the municipal equipment operator course in 2024 through the Skills Development Fund, and that a copy of this resolution be sent to the Minister of Labour, Training, Immigration and Skilled Trades, David Piccini, Township of Georgian Bluffs Member of Provincial Parliament, the Honourable Rick Byers, MPP, and the Association of Ontario Road Supervisors. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Coburn? Councillor Winters? Is there any further discussion? We'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Okay, next item is 11.2, 2024 draft budget. Letter from Anne and Bernie Mondery. Does any member wish to comment on that letter? See no one, we will receive that for information. The next item is 11.2.2, a letter from Tom Briggs. Again, about the 2024 proposed budget increase. Does any member wish to comment? Seeing none, again, we will receive for information. And 11.3, a letter from Megan Grigg, Climate Action Initiatives. Does any member wish to comment on that one? Councillor Winters?
I don't want to comment on individual letters here, but I think there's a theme that we're seeing, and I think as council, we need to recognize it. We are receiving feedback. It's unfortunate there's only been 2 letters sent to us about our proposed budget increase for 2024. We receive a bunch from the climate action team group affiliations, which is great. We're doing everything we can do to do that. But I don't feel that we're actually taking any of the correspondence, the comments that we're receiving from the negative proposed tax increase to heart. We respond and say, yeah, we're doing what we are. Yeah, the numbers are what the numbers are. I just don't feel as a council member that we're actually taking that to heart and trying to do something about it. My gut still turns at the proposed 2024 tax rate increase. And I think just accepting their correspondence, I'm inundated on a day-to-day basis with phone calls and visitors at my place of employment about what's going on. And I tell everybody I meet, come and park your butt here in the council chambers, right? You can complain to me and I'll take your comments, but unless you're sitting here and you're seen, and I think there's a group out there that is very vocal, very concerned, but we're not really seeing what's out there. So I just have to throw that out there. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Does anyone else wish to comment? Deputy Mayor Pringle.
Thank you, Mayor Carlton. Yeah, no, I gotta echo what Rick's saying there too. And again, I know we've had this conversation too many times already about the budget, but I don't know how many times I've looked at it now too. And I don't know, like if somebody's got a suggestion, what we can take back, I'm all open for it too. I don't know where we want to start to take back on some things there. I get it's 9.1, 0.9, whatever it is, the rate increase. I get that piece, but I'm like, if there's options, I'd love to hear them.
Thank you. I would agree with that. I think all of council and staff working together put a lot of effort into this budget to try and get it down. And sad to say, our reality seems to be a higher amount this year than what we've been accustomed to having to put through. So if there's no further comments on the correspondence, do we need a motion to receive it or no? Okay. So moving on to committee reports, 12.1 Committee of the Whole. Recommendation is that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held on February 7th, 2024 be adopted, including recommendations COW 2024-010 to COW 2024-018. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Shouldice? Seconder? Deputy Mayor Pringle? Is there any discussion on those items? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? And that is carried. And we are on to item 13, staff reports, 13.1 corporate services. The recommendation is that report COR 2024-006 be received for information and that council approve bylaw 2024-011 sums required bylaw to adopt the 2024 operating and capital budgets for the Township of Georgian Bluffs. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Shouldice? Seconder? Councillor Coburn? Is there any discussion? Does anyone on council have any questions? Councillor Coburn, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Carlton, and through you to my colleagues around the council, virtual and real table. Like Deputy Mayor Pringle and Councillor Winters, I've been doing a lot of thinking about the budget as well. It is, as you say, Mayor Carlton, a tough one. We have a lot of catching up to do, I'm going to say, especially in terms of asset management and investing in the future of our infrastructure. There is one part of the budget that I'm still feeling uncomfortable about, I'm just one person. I don't know that this is going to be necessarily a deal breaker for me, but I would be remiss if I didn't express some concerns. I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around a full-time permanent asset management staff person. I've tried to do some reading in terms of other municipalities. Some are committing money on a one-year basis for contract services to get their asset management plan up and running, and then encouraging their financial staff to carry forward with that. I think others are looking at arrangements whereby they're possibly sharing asset management positions. For a municipality of our size to commit to a permanent full-time asset management position still doesn't sit well with me. And maybe it's because I don't understand what this person is going to be doing at their desk for 35 or 40 hours a week, day in and day out, year after year, forever and a day. I just don't understand it. If this was a 2-year contract, I could get my head around it, but I'm struggling with adding this permanent position when I don't really, I'm not convinced that a municipality of our size needs that. Is this going to have a huge impact or any impact really on the tax rate? Probably not. But anytime you add a permanent position to your staff, you better mean it, because over time, the salary and the benefits and the increases to all of those things add up over time. And I think we just need to be very careful about adding new positions, especially if we don't understand the purpose and the need. And maybe I'm the only one who doesn't get it. But I'm just going to put that out there and see if my colleagues on council feel the same way or not. Thank you.
Any comments from anyone else? Councillor Day.
I'd be curious to hear from staff if I think the 2-year contract argument is a good question, and I'd just like to hear some other perspectives on the benefits of having someone full-time permanent versus getting us started off with the asset management plan.
So you, Mayor Carlton, I'll take a stab at that. So I'm going to talk in generalities and then in specifics. So the reality is we won't fill a 2-year contract. The reality of municipal government right now is we struggle sometimes to fill positions, and certainly for an asset management coordinator, there will be very few people that would be looking for a 2-year asset management coordinator role. There are probably at least 10 of these advertised right now that are full-time in other areas of the province, including some that are fairly local. So I don't think that we would fill a 2-year contract position. I'm also going to reflect slightly on the word permanence. Permanent doesn't mean permanent really anymore. And so the reality, I think, that in my experience is if we can keep a staff member for 4 to 5 years, we're doing pretty well. We managed to get 7 years out of them, we're doing really well. And at 7 years, they're probably looking for another opportunity. And so the reality of this is that whoever comes on board as our asset management coordinator now is unlikely to be here in 7 or 8 years' time. And that's an opportunity for us to relook at that post and see whether that position is needed. My feeling is it will be needed. But if it's not needed, then we can either declare the position redundant and no longer required. We can reallocate that resource to an emerging priority that might exist at that point in time, or we can just hold off and you reuse that, read that allocation as and when it is needed. So the reality is I don't think we are committing today to having an asset management coordinator here for the next 25 years. I think what we're seeking, staff are seeking through the budget at this point, is we know that we have a solid 5 to 10 years worth of work without too much shadow of a doubt that will fulfill somebody for a 35-hour week position. and that we'd like to see if we can attract an asset management coordinator to come and work with the township. As I say, I don't expect this will be a permanent position, as in here in 25 years' time, but I do think it's a position that we need for the foreseeable future. The challenge with contract roles is contract role is, in the eyes of the law, exactly the same as a permanent role. So it doesn't save us any money. It just limits the amount of time we keep them. Still subject to the same benefits. They're still subject to the same pension requirements. Their soft costs are still the same. So there's little to be saved from a financial perspective from a contract over a full-time role, and quite a lot to be lost in who you attract to that position. So I think this is a valuable conversation, and I should share from a staff perspective that, you know, I don't think any of us are desperately happy to be sitting here at 9.1%, but that's the reality of where we sit at this point in time. We feel that this is a good budget to be putting before council at this time. That doesn't negate the fact that 9.1 is a high level to be at. So that's perhaps where my comments would be. I don't know, Ms. Buchanan, if you had anything you wanted to add to that.
Through your chair. Speaking as where many of your asset management responsibilities have fallen, it has always been the side of the desk, which is kind of shown as the state of our infrastructure now. We don't want to see another plan that we put in place and have it pushed to the side because it becomes the side of the desk, and you don't have that person who is the driving factor behind the need to have it reviewed, reflected, and implemented. I agree with Niall that it is something we need right now. There is many legislative changes around asset management coming down the line. We are already behind the first due date. That was last June. There's another due date this year, another one the year after. And that's just what they've released to date. The asset management is capital assets came into play for the township in 2010. It has evolved and changed to where we are now, that it will likely continue to evolve and change. But as Niall said, anytime that there is a change, it gives us an opportunity to reevaluate the need.
Thank you. Councillor Coburn?
Yeah, so I appreciate hearing your perspective, Ms. Buchanan, for sure. I've worked in public sector for 30 years, and I have never heard the argument that, well, we're hiring someone permanently, but it's not to be considered permanent because staff don't stay. So that's a different philosophy for me, I have to say. I think if we need someone for 3 years, you hire them for 3 years. If there's a way to combine that position with a neighboring municipality so that we cost share, then that's what we ought to be looking at. I'm not so sure that we have done that work yet to justify that permanent position. So as I say, that's the only part of the budget that strikes a bit of a chord with me. And certainly we know that the statistics indicate that people stay 4 years or so, but I believe that's a statistic that's specific to the CAO position. I don't know that that's the same as all positions within a municipality. But then I'm not in the know, perhaps. But so as I say, it's not a deal breaker for me, pending what my council colleagues have to say on the matter. But I really would have liked to seen us reach out to neighboring municipalities around this initiative to see if we could share that particular resource.
Thank you, Councillor Coburn. So part of what I understand, oh, Deputy Mayor Pringle, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Mark Carlton. Yeah, I was just going to echo the Councillor Coburn there. I was thinking the same thing too. We can be the leader, we can hire the person, but as we learned at County Council last week there, we've got to share resources between municipalities and work more collaboratively as a group. So I'm hoping if we do have somebody hired on full time, that we reach out to the municipalities and see, you know, if we can farm out a bit of time too. and recoup some of those costs on that too. So yeah, it's about working together as a group in the municipality world here now and through the county. So yeah, I just wanted to echo, I hope we do everything we can there.
Thank you. And Councillor Scholdice.
I'll make my comments quick here, but I'm in full agreement with Councillor Coburn in the idea of cost sharing between a neighboring municipality. I will be the first to say that as a new councillor, I don't know anything about that, how the processes work with that. So two-part question, is that something we can do? Is that something we can table now? And is that, or what are the processes involved in doing that?
So through you, Mayor Carlton, great conversation. And I genuinely mean that. Again, I'm going to try and deal with these things in two separate ways. And our principal planner just reminded me the other big piece of work for the asset management coordinator over the next few years, of course, is development charges. And so it's not like we're short of work that this person is going to be contributing to. So I wouldn't suggest that this is a position which is worth, certainly in the initial few years, even contemplating. We've got more than a full-time amount of work for this person to do. However, I am going to take the opportunity that's being given to me by Deputy Mayor Pringle's questions and Councillor Scholdice's questions there to talk a little bit about the idea of shared resources. So that has been something which has been considered and it continues to be considered between the municipalities, and is a body of work which I am confident that over the next few years and over the next year, and indeed hopefully over the first few months of this year, myself and the other CAOs around the Grey County area will be looking into. They are active conversations that we've had. There is certainly precedent that's been set. We will be entering into an agreement around a shared resource, assuming the budget gets passed, in regards to fire prevention. So there are definitely some opportunities there. It's not to say it's not without its complexities, having a shared resource between different municipalities. We all are slightly unique, but there is definitely something that can be picked away at and looked at there. And I would share that my colleagues around Grey County are all of a like mind on that one. So not necessarily in this area, but there are definitely areas where the sharing and more efficient use of resourcing is something which is very front and center of mind. So definitely. So yes, we can. I wouldn't suggest this is the first place that we look to. I'm not ruling that out as something which might be a possibility in future years, but I think we definitely have a full table. To Councillor Coburn's earlier comments, I'd say your current CAO is looking forward to more than a 4-year tenure here. So I'm not quite sure where the 4-year comes from, but I'm hoping to beat that record. And you know, I would indicate that we've done a couple of reorganizations this year where we have done exactly the scenario that I played out, where we've basically removed a position which is vacant to reallocate it to another position to make best use of the needs that we have as a town. So the mandate I will take forward on a go-forward basis is we have a approved headcount of around about 40. We use that headcount as best meets the needs of the organisation at the time that we have vacancies that need to be filled. And so whenever a vacancy naturally occurs, I will consider with the senior leadership team where that vacancy is most appropriately filled. And it's not necessarily a case of, if the asset management coordinator is here for 4 years and then decides they'd like to move off and work for the town of Blue Mountains or wherever they might want to go after that, we will stop, we will pause, and we will reflect on whether we still need that position filled in that way, or whether we need to allocate that position for another use of the township at that point in time. So I think these are all really valid points that have been made. I wouldn't be tweaking the asset management coordinator this evening. That would not be my recommendation at this point.
Thank you for those comments. If I could just make a comment, I think with the asset management plan, we have a compliance issue with this plan at this point. We are not compliant, and that would be one of the major drivers in having that person in place, is to get us back into compliance with legislative requirements. And I also think, I'm looking to our treasurer, that without a valid asset management plan, we could be at risk for not getting certain grants and such. And I'm seeing nods there. Thank you. Councillor Coburn, did you have your hand up again? Go ahead.
I do. Thank you, Mayor Carlton. And I hope we all realize that there are regulatory requirements to get the asset management plan where it ought to be. I'm just not convinced that once we get that body of work done, there's going to be the same amount of work going forward, but I will let that go. I did want to reflect on Councillor Scholdice's comment because it was a good one. And I don't want it to get lost. What I heard Councillor Scholdice say is, how do we make this happen? And I think that's an excellent question, because we have these theoretical conversations and we talk about vague notions, and then 3 years down the road we find we're still talking about the same thing. So I would suggest that when we look at strategic direction next time, we look at specifics around how to share staff with neighboring municipalities to find efficiencies that way. Because folks, I think we need to. Budgets are increasing and increasing and increasing all the time, and we're going to get to the point where we can't afford it. We can't keep asking our ratepayers to shoulder a 9 or 10% increase every year. And barring finding those kinds of efficiencies, the only other option we're going to have is regionalization and more amalgamation of lower tiers. So thank you, Councillor Scholdice, for asking for some specifics around that. And I think it's up to council to look at that next time we talk about strategic directions.
Thank you. And Councillor Winters.
Thank you. Great conversation. And I don't think anybody here is questioning the requirement for an asset management coordinator position. And I need to say it, and I don't know how to eloquently say it again. I'm not trying to offend anybody, but we sit here as a council, and once we approve this and it's in the budget, that's 9.1% this year, which automatically carries forward next year. And what we're concerned about is that when we approve this, that next year it doesn't change as a chameleon and that dollar value looks to something else, but it's in the budget, so it's there. So we just keep moving forward with it. And I think the way to do that is to look at some sort of, is it a 2-year contract? Is it a shared service with the potential of let's extend it? I think as council, and I'm going to say it because I suspect everybody else here feels it, we need to work as efficiently as we can. We need to figure out what that is, and we need to make sure that when we approve something, it stays on the direction that it's approved, unless council then therefore approves the change of that. I mean, I'm not looking at anybody in the room, no specifics, but in the year and a half I've been here, I feel like I've watched a magic show at some point in time where things just kind of evolved and went, oh, I guess we approved the intent of that, but it changed. And then that's, I think, to approve a budget at 9.1%, we need the confidence level and the comfort level that this isn't going to happen in front of us. If we need staff, we need staff. I get that. But it's not just adding staff and changing things and being careful of every word that we approve in front of us, because it can be interpreted as something different. I think that's my fear. Again, I'm not questioning the requirement of an asset management. I know it's regulatory, but we just need that confidence. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone for the comments. So if there's no other discussion, I will call the vote on this. All in favor? Go ahead, Councillor Winters.
I lost my original train of thought there. One of the questions I have is it imperative that it be approved tonight? One of the conversations, or a couple of conversations I did have is, we had the public meeting on 30th of January, and then immediately a week later we had public comment, and some didn't have time to digest and do that. If we didn't pass it tonight and it didn't get passed for a month, what are the implications of that?
I would turn to staff on that one.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, I'll take first run at this and let Ms. Buchanan lead in. If this was deferred for a month, then next week's meeting is going to get quite short, quite quickly, because there's a whole bunch of projects which we're getting kicked off, which rely on the budget being pushed past tonight, so they would be pushed off a month. So in essence, there is nothing to stop this from being pushed off for a month. The reality is we wouldn't be pushing it off for a month because at this point, we actually have no direction to go back. So I would ask council to provide a direction as to what they wish to see happen between the budget being presented now and the budget being presented in a month's time.
So that actually is, Niall worked his way into my second part of the question, is I do know that there are some tenders out there at this point in time that they're subject to budget approval, right? That's typically the way you do that. Have we, or do we anticipate any savings in those capital projects coming through that if we prolong the budget for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, that we could actually reduce some of our capital requests in our budget based on what we're seeing in results. It's just a comment or what the thoughts are out there. I mean, if we can go from a 9.19% and come in at 8.5 or an 8.6 because of something that we've done, and it looks that way on paper, then by all means, I think that's something we should look at.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, I think I'm going to briefly reflect back on the conversation we had, I think, on the 7th there, which was about, I heard a clear direction to staff. I may not have had all the hands go up as a motion, but a clear direction around the fact that we need to look closely at efficiencies and effective and making decisions with efficiency in mind. I think the reality is, and the precise example that you've just laid out in front of us, Councillor Winters, is around tenders. Any tender that comes in under budget will see that money flow back to the reserve from which it was coming from, or the point where it was coming from. So it is dollars saved, and you'll see that as the year goes on. And it is our hope, as we indicated last week, that will attract grant opportunities and grant monies, which will further decrease the impact of the spending. Now that money then flows back and does exactly what you were indicating earlier on. It's money saved, which is going to lessen the tax increase next year, because that money is no longer being spent and it's sitting in the reserve ready to go for next year. So those savings will be realised whether the budget is passed tonight or budget is passed in a couple of weeks' time or a few weeks' time. I'd come back to the point, though, that we only have one of those tenders outright at this point in time. It wouldn't make a significant difference of the magnitude that you're talking about, although it is, we suspect, a good news story that's coming away. There are other projects which we're hoping to kick off next week, subject to the budget approval, which would be delayed. And again, I'd come back to the point of what would you like us to change if we're representing the budget in 2 weeks' time or 4 weeks' time?
Councillor Coburn, go ahead.
I'm not entirely convinced that not approving it tonight means a delay. We have often gone into, correct me if I'm wrong, my council colleagues that were with us last term, we've often gone into April, May, I want to say, to approve our budget. So, I think this is still ambitious, the timing. I don't see a problem in delaying it. I do agree with our CAO that we need to have a reason for that. I'm not entirely sure if that should be more public engagement. But I know one thing I would like to see happen is for the CAO to explore a consultant to do the asset management plan, how much that would cost us. Get us up to speed, see if our trustee CA can manage it from there on in. That's perhaps one thing that we could look at tweaking in the budget, and there may be more. And the second part of my comment is in regards to what Councillor Winters is saying about the tenders. And CAO Lobley, you say that if there's an under cost, a lower cost to it, that will go into reserves, and then we'll see a subsequent lowering of the tax in that budget line possibly the next year. But is that the case, or are we going to then hear, well, we had this much money left over from that particular project or budget line, and it's gone into reserves and it needs to stay in reserves because we need to now build up our reserves because our asset management plan isn't where it ought to be?
So I'll do my best to try and answer some of these points, and as I say, and I think it's been said before, some really good conversation happening here. So the first point, I suppose, in terms of delay, yes, but delaying budget really does have a significant impact on our ability to work. There are tenders that we can put out and award them subject to budget approval and those sorts of things. But there are other projects which are part of this budget. Shoreline Road Allowance, which is a significant body of work, which really does need direction before it can start. And the strategic plan. These are two items which we're hoping to bring back to council next cycle. And really, they do need the backing and support of budget before they can move forward. So because budget is really council's direction to staff as to what you want to see us do over the next 12 months and beyond. So, without marching orders, without a direction, and that's fundamentally what budget is. It's our direction. So I'm quite happy to see budget delayed and deferred. If there are things that you would like us to bring back. In regards to the specific point you just put on the floor, suggested, Councillor Coburn, I've heard this council clearly articulate the fact that you don't like us using consultants as much as possible and would prefer that we didn't. We actually do have a consultant on board to write the plan. We're not so worried about the writing of the plan. We're worried about the maintaining of the plan. The asset management coordinator is not to help deliver the plan. They're to help us stay in compliance. Otherwise, we will be in the same cycle we got caught in between 2016 and now, which is every 5 years, we need to bring in a consultant at double the price it would cost staff to do, to write a plan, which we're then going to leave on a shelf until it goes out of date. And then we're going to come and get another consultant to write another plan, leave it on a shelf to go out of date. The intention we make with the asset management coordinator is to write a plan and maintain it as a valid working document, which each and every year will inform your 10-year capital plan, and each and every year will be updated and maintained so that it becomes a functional document working for the township to inform things like development charges and those sorts of projects, which we've heard of as priorities. So, I'd express, once again, happy to see budget deferred. I think taking it away with things that have not been considered, and with all due respect, we have considered the consultant route for the asset management coordinator. We have a consultant helping develop the plan. We now want the coordinator to help run the plan, make sure it doesn't go stagnant and out of date again. So quite happy to look at things. As I say, we'd need some specific things that we were needing to take out of the budget. And I think it is a case of picking which things in the budget you just don't want to do if you want us to come back with a different budget.
So I'm going to make a couple of comments here that I'm seeing. So one of them being around surplus funds at the end of the year going back into reserves. I think looking at from last week, we had an estimate of 1.6 million surplus last year that will be going back into reserves. So we know that happens, and those are funds that are there then to use in future years. I think if we don't pass the budget tonight, I'm looking at wires hanging down from the ceiling here, means we don't move forward with things like our technology that is in that budget. And if that other piece of equipment on the ceiling here goes, then we don't have anybody coming in online virtually because we don't have that capability. So I think holding up the budget actually stops us from moving forward. So I will leave my comments there and see if anyone else around council has comments they would wish to make. Deputy Mayor Pringle.
Thank you, Mayor Carlton. Yeah, so kind of going back to what Councillor Windsor had mentioned there about, a 0.5% reduction in, in the tax rate hike. I don't have that stuff available in front of me here right now. So if I can get Samantha just to refresh my memory on what 0.5% would mean to the taxpayer and what the amount would be and how much it leaves us lacking in the budget. Just for number, I'm not 100% sold on deferring yet. I just, if I know these numbers, will help me make up my mind, I think. If you can get that for me, Samantha.
So 0.5% would be $60,000.
Could we not save that in one? That doesn't seem like much for 0.5%.
1% of our total budget is 120,000.
120, okay. So I don't believe that 0.5% for us to knock off 0.5%, $60,000 is a huge ask.
But it means we have to go back and look at that whole budget again to figure out where we're going to cut that. Councillor Winters?
trying to figure out how to articulate it. I mean, the CEO has mentioned that they have anticipation of some grants. And do we risk as a council saying, based on the CEO's recommendation, there's a potential that we'll receive X number of dollars for this project? As a council, do we move forward with that assumption that you may get that? And if we don't, we pull it out of reserves, but we've come through with a smaller rate increase moving forward. I think those are the efficiencies. Those are the kind of things. I don't like the thought of saying to somebody, I'm going to take 9.1% from you this year. Probably only going to use 8.5%. So I'll just throw the rest of it in my bank account when I'm done. There's people that are struggling, right? And we can't lose sight of that surviving in today's day and age is difficult for some people. And if we don't need to take it from them this year, just to keep it for a rainy day for next year, then I think we should weather that and try to minimize that. So is that a risk that we take as council? I'm not suggesting we reduce any services, but is there something there somewhere in that budget that we can find that $60,000? We've taken bigger risks. Do we look at something like that? That's kind of my take on it.
Councillor Shouldice and then Deputy Mayor Pringle.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to throw a really wild idea out here where I'm just running some math a little bit and thinking about the idea of cost sharing off of what Councillor Coburn was talking about earlier. This environmental initiatives officer is a $90,000 per year salary job. That's a temporary 3-year position. 3 years of that is $270,000 if my math is right off the top of my head. Half of that is $135,000. What is the what I'm going to table the idea of, is it possible to cost share that position with another neighboring municipality? That would save us at 50% would be $135,000. That's over 1%. Is there any idea of or thoughts on cost sharing that new position?
I'll go to Deputy Mayor Pringle first.
All right. Yeah, caught me off guard there, Isaac, on Councillor Shouldice on that one. My thought was a little bit different on, I know we took some out of the winter plan as far as the snow removal and stuff. We haven't seen winter yet. Like if you take that 60,000 again out of that piece of it, March could come in bad and so could April, but just was curious, you could get that 60,000 out of the winter plan. That was just my suggestion.
So in that case, if we took another 60,000 out of the winter maintenance plan, if March and April got really bad, then we would be pulling out of reserves to cover that. Councillor Winters.
Don't forget about November and December and the shoulder season still in 2024. It's not just 2 months that we're planning for. There's still 4 months there. That's a risky one. We've seen sand and gravel costs go up, which means your winter sand, your replenishment of your domes, that's going to go up. I don't think I'd bank on that one.
Thank you, Councillor Winters. Deputy Mayor Pringle.
Yeah, no, good catch there, Rick. Councillor Winters on that too. There, yeah, I didn't even think of November, December. I'm just thinking that we haven't, just on the cost of salt and sand and salt, obviously they won't come down in price either. So, no, I'll gladly take that off the table.
Sorry, before I go to you, Councillor Coburn, I'm just going to make a comment on what Councillor Shouldice said. It was taking 3 years of that position to arrive at saving half of that at 135. You'd only be saving out of that half per year. So it would be 45,000 is what we'd be looking at it in a savings. So sorry, Councillor Coburn, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think we're all struggling to find ways to reduce that tax rate. I'm going to go back at the risk of any eye rolls. But if we go back to the asset management position, Niall, you reminded us that we have a consultant on board to do the plan, and that makes perfect sense to me. When is it that we expect that plan to be delivered to us for approval? Because I'm guessing maybe there's no point in hiring that position until that plan is before us and approved. Would we not need that plan in place in order to have something for this new position to be working on? So if we're not getting that plan back until fourth quarter, for example, can we put that position off for the budget for 2025?
I'll turn it over to Sam for an answer there.
So through you, I just want to highlight that the consultants are working on the requirement that was due in 2023. So we're playing catch up with this plan. There is a second requirement that this plan and our consultants are not addressing, which is due July of 2024. And when we were envisioning this position coming in, we were phasing in the first year of funding, that it is not a full year's worth of salary that is impacting your 2024 budget. We were envisioning them starting probably mid-year recruiting for the position. This would coincide with when we are anticipating a draft initial plan for the consultants to be presented, with the hopes that that plan would become finalized and in good form to meet what we are already behind in for requirements. Then we would immediately have to be starting and picking up our requirements and meeting our legislative requirements around non-core assets, which is what is due July of this year. Then there is a third phase of asset management plan that is due in July of 2025. But again, our consultants are only working on our core assets, which is what was due previously.
Thank you. That's helpful information, Samantha. I appreciate that. So let me understand then, the amount we have allocated for this position for 2024 does not represent an entire year's worth of pay. Is that correct? And if that's the case, what is the full-time yearly salary, anticipated salary plus benefits for this position for a full year then, for example, in 2025?
So through you, we have estimated it to be $104,000, and that is salary and benefits annually. So that would be a 2025 full year implication.
So that's another $100,000 ongoing salary expense. Okay, thank you.
So we are looking at half of that at 52,000 for this year. Okay. Any further comments or questions? See you.
So I'm gonna make a through you, Mayor Carlton. I enjoy these conversations because it gives me an insight and makes sure that we can be better prepared for next year. I think we can hear loud and clear that 9.1 is uncomfortable. I think if we want to reduce 9.1, we take a project off the list. But I have also heard loud and clear that we need clarity on reporting of where we managed to find efficiencies this year, and that work is ongoing. I think I've heard loud and clear that we need to look at partnership opportunities, which again has started. So you'll be pleased to know that that has started, and I can report back on that, I hope, as we get through toward budget next year. And I can hear lots of things that we need to do differently and try to be better on and sharpen pencils and all those sorts of things. I'm not sure how I want to find 60,000 in a 10 or 15 minute conversation, because that feels like making decisions on the fly, which may have implications down the line. So if there is a direction for us to go away and find another 0.5%, we can come back and we can try and find another 0.5%. That will delay budget.
Councillor Coburn?
I'm just going to ask our trusty accountant in the room, our treasurer, to do some math, because if there's a part of me that would love to see the percentage below 9, but 0.5%, what does that translate into as a difference in a yearly tax amount that an average ratepayer would be paying? Samantha, sorry to put you on the spot.
Samantha's just working that out. Councillor Day, you had a question?
Yeah, and there's so much to this job. So I feel like some of you have years of experience in this field where I don't. And I don't know the answer to this question. If there's a relationship to when we approve the budget and when things start moving, and if there's a relationship between if we've had later budgets in past years, is that possibly part of the reason why some of these projects have fallen a little bit behind? I don't know the answer to this question. I may have asked a hard question to answer, but I thought I'd throw it out there.
So through you, if you were to direct staff to find a savings of 0.5%, so that would mean that our percentage municipal tax rate increase would be 8.68% over that of last year. That would be a $9.28 approximately savings on the average assessed value of a single family dwelling. If I may, in regards to Councillor Day's comment, when you are pushing back when you're approving the budget, as our CIO mentioned, you're delaying when projects can start. So that list of projects that maybe got started within a year, now at budget time and year end, it grows. That can hinder what is getting accomplished in the next year. And it may limit what you're able to do in the following year.
So I know at the county level, staff like to get tenders and that type of thing out early because they feel they get better pricing. The later we go in the year, we're running the risk of higher pricing or not getting the jobs done at all. And that's speaking from the county perspective of what we're told there. CAO.
So you, Mayor Carlton, I'd completely agree with that. In fact, it's our hope to have this process all done and dusted before Christmas this year, because we'd ideally like to have our tenders out in the street before the turn of the year. We get the best contractors, we get the best flexibility, you get the best pricing. You also get better pricing, and you tend to get more, certainly in a market where there's more work than consultants and contractors to do the work. You get sharper pricing. If it's not subject to tendering, subject to budget approval, because there's always a bit of a gamble on that one, and that might turn somebody off from bidding on a piece of work that they would otherwise bid on. So we are hoping to bring budget forward again at the end of this year. So we're trying to bring it as far forward as we can to try and maximize the year that we can get the work done that council gives us to get done.
Councillor Coburn?
Yeah, so I just wanted to thank everyone, council and staff, for all of your comments. I know you probably all came wanting us to just sign off on this, and that's not how it's turned out exactly. But I guess what I would say is it fair to look at this 9.2 or whatever we landed at increase as not is going to be time limited, right? We have big projects, we've got expensive bridges, some road work to do. I don't imagine it's going to be over 9% forever. Every year we do a budget. I'm hoping that we have a few years of catch up to get our reserves to a place where they need to be. I guess I'm just looking for a mindset that this is a time limited kind of situation, and that we can not too far down the road, hopefully, look at a more sustainable and reasonable increase in the tax rate for folks. Is that a fair assumption to make? Are we all of that same mindset?
So through you, Mayor Carlton, I'm in decade 3 of my municipal career. This is the highest tax rate I've seen in 3 decades. I've also never experienced, and again, I'm not my parents. My parents experienced mortgage rates at 18 and 19 and 20 odd percent in their lifetime. I don't think I've paid a mortgage which has got a 6% in front of it. I've been as high as a 5, but I've never been more than that. So the environment we live in today is very different to the environment that my parents lived through. Having said that, over the last few years, as we've discussed several times in these council chambers, construction inflation has risen to 15, 16, 17% at times. CPI has been running at 8% at times. So for us to be presenting a budget which is at the higher end of what is become an expected municipal norm is perhaps unsurprising this year. I suppose I'm dancing slightly around the question. I would like to think that we never need to bring a 9%, 10% budget back in front of council. I am not going to stake my career on that because I haven't got a crystal ball that tells me what the next 12 months or 18 months or 24 months will look like. However, I think, and I'll come back to the comment I think I made at the start of this, putting a 9% budget in front of council, in front of community, is not something that staff took lightly. We recognise that everybody is struggling and that the cost increases that we're facing are the cost increases that everybody is facing. So this was not put in front of council lightly, and our next budget will not be put in front of council lightly. I'm also going to reflect slightly that the next budget, which, as I indicated when we started the budget conversations a few weeks ago, this is not going to be the last hard budget we have, but this is going to be the last budget we have where we're reacting. I'm hoping that the next budget we see will be a budget which is proactive and looking to the future, a budget which is based on a 10-year horizon rather than a year-to-year horizon, a budget which is based on at least partial understanding of our asset management plan and the impact that it's going to have over the next 10 years. And between now and then, you will have had a conversation around what you would like to see your reserve accounts do and how you'd like to see them function. In short, I think that whilst I can't guarantee that this is the last budget at this level, I can, with some confidence, suggest that we will be going into the next budget with substantially better, substantially more data on which to base those discussions, and that you will have had almost 12 months of budget conversations leading up to the next budget. And so I think that I can say that the next budget is going to be one which is different to this one, because there is going to be a lot more information in front of you and a lot more run-in time to get to that budget point. And I will also hope that it's not a 9% budget. I am hoping that everything settles down and calms down a little bit, and that we are in a much better position next year. And you can have my assurance, and I know the leadership team is with me on this one, is that we will do all that we can to bring the budget in at the most value we can possibly deliver, based on the priorities that council establishes for us.
Thank you. And one other comment I would make here, and I think this has been kind of silently sneaking up on us the last few years, is the increase in insurance rates. And we've been absorbing that as time has gone, and perhaps we shouldn't have absorbed so much and kept rates so low over the past few years. And that's another thing contributing to what's increasing everything at this point, I think. So if there's no more discussion on this, I would like to call the vote. All in favor of the motion that's on the floor at this point, which is to accept. How about I read the recommendation again? Sorry, Rick, go ahead.
Yeah, go
Okay,
ahead.
so I'm going Councillor Winters, Deputy Mayor Pringle, Councillor Coburn.
What I was going to do is propose an amendment to that motion. And I think all these projects, I think what we've done is a very responsible budget. We've prioritized what needs to be done. I still struggle with that 9.19 number. I think it would be very easy to say, let's reduce our budget by $60,000. Let's get that presented rate down to 8 point whatever that is. And we're going to risk that there's going to be efficiencies in that budget. And I think we can move forward. You look at the 200 or 300 some line items and find $60,000 over that. I mean, we're reducing everything by $1 or $2 here or there. We get down to a palatable 8 point something percent. We rely on our staff and we trust our staff that they're going to find the efficiencies. We're still going to have a surplus at the end of the year, but we're not looking like we're coming through and gouging at 9.1%. So the motion I was going to put on the floor is, let's amend this budget, take $60,000 out of it. Let's move it forward. Let's keep this municipality moving, because I do agree with all the statements made. Just that number isn't palatable in my mind. And I think our staff have the opportunity, have the desire, have the willingness, and will prove to us that they're successful. And I think I'd like to take that risk.
Deputy Mayor Pringle, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Carlton. Yeah, great points by Councilor Winters there too. And I'm kind of the, this is a real hard one because I like what we've done, how we did the process this year. We had good engagement early. We were involved. We had anybody that is a taxpayer could be involved at any numerous amount of times through the process. And we have gave people lots of opportunity to come and speak and put their comments in on that. And we haven't been getting that response. We got a few responses. Well, it's too high. Well, yes, you can say that, but where are the efficiencies? And I'm of mindset is what Rick's saying or Councilor Winters is saying there. $60,000 is to be a real small ask for us to take that out of somewhere out of the budget. I don't want to defer this. We got projects we want to move forward. We're a township that wants to move forward. And if we can do that and move this forward with an amendment, I'm happy to second that motion. I just don't want us to delay. I don't want us to start delaying over $9 a person. I want us to find that $60,000. We can find that efficiencies, I think. I do believe we have great people to do this. I don't want to change anything. If we can find that 60,000, I'll happily second that motion. We can move it forward. I just don't want to delay this any longer. I don't want to keep talking about it. I want us to get it done and move this township on.
Okay, we are going to take a very quick recess so the CAO and treasurer can talk here for a minute. Okay, are we back and ready to go? Are we recording?
Thank you for accommodating that recess. So the CEO and I have spoke that you can defer the budget. You can make an amendment to the recommendation that is in front of you. Both would result in a budget not being approved tonight. Your bylaw would not be able to pass if you are doing either of those, if you are deferring or if you are making a change to the recommendation that is in front of you. The bylaw that is the item 14.2.2 would be deferred.
So is that what council wants to do? Defer? Or pass the budget expecting there will be savings throughout the year? Councillor Coburn, your hand is up.
Excuse me. Thank you. When I asked the question about what difference it would make to reduce the increase from just over 9 to 8 something, 0.5%, I think it was, Samantha said $9 per household, but she didn't say if that was per year, per month. I'm assuming, Samantha, you meant per year?
Yes, per year.
Okay, so if that's what we're asking staff to do because we feel like arbitrarily 9 sounds like too much, 9.2 sounds like too much, but 8.8 sounds better for the sake of $9 per household per year. I don't know if I can get behind that. I think I would just rather us commit to looking for as many efficiencies as we can and looking to a more reasonable budget next year.
Thank you. And I think one of the things that I remember from when we were going through all of our budget deliberations was that staff were bringing in a more realistic budget, in that looking at cost of large projects going forward. In the past, we would have already had an assumption made that there were grant funding available for those. And that assumption hasn't been made this year. We've been given the full cost of the project. So any grants coming in will be our savings. So I think that's a more realistic way to look at it, is this would be the total cost. Any grants are going to offset that cost. And I was pleased with hearing that. Councillor Coburn?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Mayor Carlton, but the point I tried to make at the last meeting is, okay, so we're not assuming that we're going to get grants, but that doesn't do anything for the ratepayers and having to pay that tax bill this year. It just puts more money in the reserves or in the bank or the surplus for next year. I did have one other question, if I may, for Samantha. I'm wondering why we didn't put, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe we put anything in revenue for the short-term accommodation program for this year's budget. So if we're starting that program this year, which I believe to be the case, and we're looking at over 100 establishments paying a registration fee, was that revenue not included? And if it wasn't, I'm just wondering why, because that would certainly make it, that would put a little bit more in the revenue side, at least a little bit.
Yes, so through you, so the 65,000, the budget total ask, is funded 1,100 from the short-term accommodations reserve. So these are funds that you received in 2023 as the voluntary registrations. We have 12,500 being funded from user fees. So that would be 2024 user fees for those users who are performing or providing short-term accommodations. And then the remaining 51,400 from the tax levy.
Okay, gotcha. For some reason, I was thinking we weren't putting in that revenue for this year. Thank you for that.
Okay, so we're back to, I'm going to read the recommendation that we've got on the floor so that we're clear about what we're doing here. That report COR 2024-006 be received for information, and that council approve bylaw 2024-011, sums required by law to adopt the 2024 operating and capital budgets for the township of Georgian Bluffs. I believe I have a mover and a seconder on that. So if there's Councillor Winters.
So I agree with that statement, but I think I proposed an amendment to that motion, and I believe Deputy Mayor Pringle seconded that we would look for a $60,000 savings. So we need to really vote on that amendment motion, right? Before we can move forward. I don't think delaying this 3 weeks till March the 6th is the end all to be all of the world. $9 is $9. That's important to a lot of people. So I'd like my motion to be voted on. Thank you.
Sorry, I was missing that fact. I was going back to the original. So we have a motion to reduce the budget by 60,000. Deputy Mayor Pringle, you seconded that? Okay, I'm seeing a nod. Councillor Coburn.
I just want to, if we're going to vote on that, I want to be clear what we're voting on. So, and this is going to be so not the proper terminology, but forgive me, I'm getting hungry. We're looking at staff to pick away at different budget lines to try to find efficiencies. And I believe what I heard Deputy Mayor Pringle say is that what we're not looking to do is to take out an entire project to find that $60,000 in that manner. So I just want to be clear about that.
Okay, then I would have a question on this amendment. Are we looking to ask staff to do that? Because my thought on the budget is it needs to come back in front of all of council for us to see where that $60,000 reduction has taken place. Am I correct in that, CAO?
So through you, Mayor Carlton, if that's the direction that staff received this evening, we'll bring back a committee of the whole proposal for finding enough to bring it beneath the 9% level in the order of 60,000 or thereabouts. We will bring back a revised budget to committee of the whole and defer budget till the March 6th, the passing of the bylaw till March 6th. So we will bring back a report to show where we found that money.
Okay, so that would be coming back to us for next week. Is that sufficient time?
It's a very good point. Through you, Mayor Carlton, no, we don't have time to bring that back for next week. We would have to do that as a walk-on report for council on March 6th. So you would basically be in the same situation as you are tonight. You either support what staff bring forward or we defer the bylaw again. We'd have to do it as a walk-on.
Councillor Scholz.
Sorry, now March 6th is council, I think. Oh, okay. I thought you meant.
Councillor Day.
I just clarified that if we support this amendment, then the budget is delayed. The entire budget. So it's we can't approve the budget with the 60,000 taken out of it and have the budget pass.
No, it really should come back to all of council for that decision to make. That's not a fair thing to put on to staff to go find 60,000 because that could come back and we could all go, oh, no, that's not where we wanted you to find it. So that has to come back in front of us. So is there any further discussion on the amendment to the motion? Councillor Scholz.
Just finalize my statements by agreeing with Councillor Winters and saying $9 is $9 and $9 is the precedent of finding savings. I agree with Councillor.
Okay, so I am going to call the vote on, sir. Carly, go ahead.
Sorry, through you, Mayor Carlton, just a point of clarification as well. We will need to also amend the last line of the motion. So the amendment in totality could read that staff be directed to reduce the budget by 60,000 and that bylaw 2024-011 sums required by law to adopt the 2024 operating and capital budgets for the Township of Georgian Bluffs be deferred for consideration at the March 6th council meeting.
Okay, thank you. Everybody is clear on what that is? Okay, so we are voting on the amendment. All in favor? That carries. So we're back to the main motion now as amended. So I will call the vote on the main motion as amended. All in favor? And that is carried. Okay. We are moving on then to bylaws. So the first one, 14.1.1, recommendation. Whereas council has given consideration to the written comments submitted by the agencies in the decision on proposed zoning bylaw amendment application Z0823 for Matt Brown for property located at 440 Princess Street, Shallow Lake. And whereas council has considered oral submissions made at the public meeting, Therefore, be it resolved that Council of the Township of Georgian Bluffs is satisfied that the proposed amendment is consistent with the Provincial Policy Statement 2020 and other governing regulations, and that bylaw 2024-007 be read a first, second, and third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Schuldeis, Councillor Coburn. Is there any discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. The next bylaw recommendation is whereas council has given consideration to the written comments submitted by the agencies in the decision on proposed zoning bylaw amendment application Z1023 for Tyson Schlegel for property located at 401183 Gray Road 17, Georgian Bluffs, and whereas council has considered oral submissions made at the public meeting, therefore be it resolved that Council of the Township of Georgian Bluffs is satisfied that the proposed amendment is consistent with the Provincial Policy Statement 2020 and other governing regulations, and that bylaw 2024-008 be read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Winters, Deputy Mayor Pringle. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Next item is the recommendation is whereas council has given consideration to the written comments submitted by the agencies in the decision on proposed zoning bylaw amendment application Z1123 for Judith and Thomas Nagel for the property located at 719409 Highway 6, Georgian Bluffs, and whereas council has considered oral submissions made at the public meeting, therefore be it resolved that council of the Township of Georgian Bluffs is satisfied that the proposed amendment is consistent with the Provincial Policy Statement 2020 and other governing regulations, and that bylaw 2024-009 be read a first, second, and third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Schuldeis, Councillor Coburn. Is there any discussion? We'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Other bylaws. 14.2.1. Recommendation that bylaw 2024-010 being a bylaw to appoint a chief administrative officer and repeal bylaw 2023-030 be read a first, second, and third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Coburn, Deputy Mayor Pringle. Is there any discussion? All in favor? That is carried. Congratulations and thank you. Next item has been deferred. Thank you. And the last bylaw is that bylaw 2024-012 being a bylaw to adopt a council correspondence policy be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Day, Deputy Mayor Pringle. Is there any discussion? Councillor Coburn.
I'm just looking to try to recall what happened when we looked at the first draft. So, through you, Mayor Carlton, to the clerk, I guess I'm looking for clarification that this is the revised version that we discussed at the last minute or the last meeting. And I wonder if you could highlight for us what changes were made to this policy as a result of our last discussion at council. Thank you.
I will turn it over to the clerk here.
Thank you, Mayor Carlton. Through you to Councillor Coburn. The only change that was suggested resulting from the last meeting was an amendment to the specification for withholding items from the council agenda, and that decision being the decision of the clerk alone versus the decision of the clerk, CAO, and mayor. So the new, the policy that is before you does reflect that that is the decision of the clerk.
Does that answer your question? Okay, if there's no further discussion, I will call the vote. All in favor? And that is carried. Unfinished business, we have none. New business, Safe and Sound Facilities Tour. They have offered some alternative dates of March 13th and March 20th in advance of council at 3 p.m. Going to look to council. Does anyone wish to attend? Councillor Day? Councillor Schuldeis? I know I plan on attending. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no others, do we need a motion on that to approve? Councillor Day?
To clarify, are they offering tours both on the 13th or the 20th, or should we pick one of those? And if we're picking one, I have a slight preference for the 13th.
And I'm fine with the 13th. So do we need a motion on that for that item? Council business, we're invited. Yeah, so, okay, so we will have a motion that Councillor Day and Councillor Schuldeis and myself as the mayor will attend on March 13th. Could I have a mover and a seconder on that motion, please? Councillor Schuldeis, the seconder, please. Okay, that motion fails. Kathy, go ahead.
Sorry, I think I'm a little confused. Were we just approving you to attend, or were we approving for folks to attend and be paid? That's
Yes.
where I was, it wasn't worded that way, and so I was confused. I would like us to have a conversation at some point as to what we approve for payment and what we don't, because I'm finding that more and more requests are coming, and more we're paying for 2, 3, 4 members of council to attend. And I guess I think we need to have some more thoughtful consideration of these kinds of things. At what point do we say attend for your own benefit and learning, but we don't need to be paid for absolutely everything we go to do? And I'm sorry if I offend anyone by saying that, but I do find that it is becoming a bit of a slippery slope. And I may have voted differently if I had known exactly what we were voting on. So apologies.
So because no one seconded the motion, it never went on the floor, so there was nothing to vote on. Deputy Mayor Pringle?
Thank you, Mayor Carlton. Yeah, I was kind of, the reason I didn't second it was I was under the impression that we're going to get paid to do it. At some point in time, we get paid every month to do things in the township. So, you know, I know we all attended the Chinese New Year. There are 3 of us attended the Chinese New Year on Saturday. And, you know, I did that on my own grace too. And I imagine you both did too. So yeah, to go to Safe and Sound, that's really for your own benefit. If you can go to get more information out of it, I don't think we should be paid for it. I'd love to attend, but I'm not going to be around that week. And I certainly never expected to get paid to go. So that was where I was leaning. If it's education and you want to go to learn more about it, that's great. That's what we get paid for.
So I think that's a further discussion to come back when the remuneration policy is looked at again in the future. So we will move on then to Councillor Coburn. You had asked to speak about CAO appraisal.
Thank you, Mayor Carlton, and through you to my council colleagues. When I received an email regarding the CAO evaluation process to start, I had some concerns that wasn't perhaps the most transparent way of making a decision about how to proceed with a particular process. I feel as though the public has a right to know what we're doing, and I'm never comfortable making decisions like that behind the scenes by email. So that's why I'm addressing it here. I think probably the public has a right to see our policy. That should be included with that item. But in particular, I will voice my concern over this process being led by and involving a staff member. I have looked at the best practices. I have looked at the recommendations. I've read the CAO evaluation toolkit that's published by the CAMA that specifically says we should not be doing this process through one of our staff members. And I say that because I do not wish to put any of our staff members in a difficult position. The CAO is our employee. We are told time and time again that that's the only employee that reports directly to us. And I feel very strongly that this process should be led by council. And I'm happy to recommend that we go through a small committee of council for submitting goals and objectives, which is sort of the first step in this process. But I do not feel that it's appropriate to use a staff member for this process. Thank you.
Any other comments on this? Councillor Winters?
Thank you. And I would just like to echo that of Councillor Coburn as well. I mean, when I was reading that, I was again uncomfortable, and I think that it should be a small subcommittee of council that deals with their employee and not an employee of the CAO involved in the process. I don't feel comfortable with that. So I do echo all of Councillor Coburn's concerns and recommendations.
Councillor Day?
I support Councillor Coburn's well-researched opinion as well.
CAO?
So recognising through you, Mayor Carlton, that this is centres on me, I'm very familiar with the resources that Councillor Coburn refers to. However, Council has an approved policy, which is a public-facing policy, which actually specifically includes the HR manager in the process as providing advice to Mayor and Council in undertaking the process. So at this point in time, as I understand it, Council has been asked to submit comments as per the policy, which, as I also understand, I don't think Council's yet had an opportunity to do. And that policy does specifically mention the role of the HR manager in helping navigate through the first stages of that process. So I think we're following the policy. So I think if we're going to follow something else, we're going to have to get rid of the policy. The policy is a public policy. It is publicly available. The CMAA policy that has been referenced actually does indicate that this is a staff-led process. It indicates it's the CAO that leads his or her own process with members of council. I quite agree, full transparency, but our policy is approved by council and does include the HR manager. So I think if we're going to step away from the policy, I think we need to bring back a new policy on how you're going to do the CAO performance review. So that we can have a policy and a process which is open, transparent, and available for the public to view and be aware of, but that will take some time.
Councillor Coburn?
So I'm not recommending we delay the process any further. It is our policy, and it is within our purview to waive the policy or part of the policy. And so I would move that we waive that part of the policy and move rather to a committee of council to receive the goals and objectives and for the remaining of the process itself. That is our policy. We have a right to waive it. In this case, it's a new policy. We haven't used it. I think if we see something that doesn't seem right to us, we would be remiss to just go ahead and then regret it possibly later. And I would reiterate that the CAMA toolkit specifically says you should not use your HR or a staff member to lead this process. So if that's a misstep in our policy, then let's change it. Let's waive it and start this course off on the proper footing.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to the clerk for her comments on this.
Thank you, Mayor Carlton. Through you, just reflecting on the discussion, I don't know that it would be helpful to waive certain provisions within that policy. It sounds like there needs to be a more comprehensive look at the policy as a whole, but this would delay your performance review. So I don't think that waiving certain provisions of the policy will really benefit you. It seems like you have sincere concerns about the way that policy is laid out. And if it's informed by best practices, perhaps a review of that policy would be a benefit.
So my comment here, if I may, would be, I agree. We put the policy in place. We have never actually used it to know how it will work. At this point in the process, it would be suggesting that we are looking at setting goals for the CAO as all of council. So I'm hesitant to start changing the policy because I think that slows our process down. And it's been a concern all along that we never get through to getting our CAO appraisal done. So I guess that's my hesitation in trying to start changing the policy as we're trying to do the process as well. Councillor Coburn, I think you have another comment.
I'm really trying to get a motion on the floor here, so I'm going to try again. I move that we continue with the timelines and the process, but instead of sending the materials to the HR manager, they be sent to a subcommittee of council instead. And if you would, I'll leave it at that, but if you would like me to read the section of the toolkit that specifically says the HR resources department or any other employee is not recommended to be intimately involved in the process, I'm happy to provide that statement for you. I don't know what else to say. I want to do this right. I don't want to delay it. Yes, we have a policy before us. It is our policy. And I would recommend that we can look at the policy down the road. But for now, I would like to see information, documents being sent to our team as per the recommended processes and best practices. Thank you.
Okay, so you have put a motion on the floor. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Winters. Is there further discussion on that? Seeing none, I will call the vote on that motion. All in favor? Any opposed? So that motion carries. So the next step will be to set up a subcommittee. How many on said subcommittee? And who's willing to put their names forward for that?
May I recommend 3 might be an adequate number? I'm happy to be on it, but I don't feel I need to be either. So if there are 3 besides myself, and I really wish Councillor Thompson was here because I think he'd be valuable in that on that committee as well.
Are there other volunteers to be on that committee? Councillor Winters? So we need one more. Deputy Mayor Pringle? So then do we need a motion to, the word has escaped me, to put those 3 people on that committee? I'm looking to the clerk. To appoint. Appoint was the word I wanted.
Through you, Mayor Carlton, yes, you would need a motion because this is outside of the scope of the policy. I would also at this point recommend waiving that policy entirely. If you're not going to follow certain aspects of it, I believe you should waive that policy. But I also will echo that I believe the policy should be brought back and looked at comprehensively in the very near future, if possible.
Okay, so do we need one motion then to start with to waive the policy in its entirety? So could I? So one motion to waive the policy in its entirety and to appoint Deputy Mayor Pringle, Councillor Coburn, and Councillor Winters to that committee. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Day and Councillor Coburn? Is there any further discussion or questions on that? Clerk.
Through you, Mayor Carlton, I'm just wondering what the scope of the committee will be, if there's no policy. So just if we could clarify what that committee will be looking at to start with.
Okay, Councillor Coburn?
May I recommend that the process continue as was outlined in the email with the same deadline, and that those documents be sent to the three of us as committee members, and that it would be our job to collate those, to put them all together into one document for council's approval.
Clerk?
Through you, Mayor Carlton. So would it be fair to say that this subcommittee is being established to set the goals? And that we would be looking at the policy beyond that?
So I think the idea is for the goals to be submitted to that group, and they will then bring it back to council as part of that original direction that was given from HR as to the process. So could we further add then the date that, so I think this Friday was to be the date for everyone to have those goals in, and to then, when is that group bringing it back to council, to all of council? Councillor Coburn?
What was the timeline that our HR
It
manager?
would be March 6th then is when that was coming back.
So we would have to meet between this Friday. That gives us 2.5 weeks to collate those and get that put together for back to the council members.
Yes.
You said
Yep.
March 6th.
And just as a question then to staff, for that to be on the next council agenda, does it need to be in to staff the Thursday or Friday before? So you would be looking at whatever that Thursday or Friday before March 6th is to have it to staff to be included on the next agenda. Councillor Coburn?
So are you suggesting that it would appear on that agenda, or we would be discussing that in closed session on March 6th? I'm just wondering what the intent is around the council meeting.
It would be in closed session, but it would normally be that it goes out with the agenda as part of that closed session so that it can be, everyone has a chance to read it. So it's not just being put in front of us the night of the meeting.
So the committee would have to meet, I would say sometime next week or early the following week.
Yes.
Does that make sense? I wonder,
Yep.
Should we decide on a date between the three of us now, or?
I think we can leave that to the three of you. I just want to be sure that we're clear on the parameters of what you'll be expected to, the timing of when you'll be expected to have that back for staff to have it included on an agenda. Carly?
Thank you, Mayor Carlton. I just wanted to throw another suggestion out there. I wondered if this subcommittee should also be looking at that policy and bringing back recommendations to council with respect to that process, because it feels like that's a missing piece right now. And I do agree that the goal setting needs to continue per the timelines, because that's a huge benefit. But I also feel like we do need to look at this policy in the very near future so that the process can continue beyond that goal setting exercise.
So then that does make sense. HR was heavily involved in helping Councillor Barfoot, Councillor Thompson, and myself set up that policy. So HR would need to be involved there, and I would think there would be staff involved to do minutes of that meeting. And CAO, do you have comment? Yeah. I'll go to Carly. Whether HR is involved or not.
It seems like there has been comments about removing HR from that process. So it sounds like the intent is to put the onus on that committee for determining what the process will be. And that committee would then report to council their findings.
But on the policy as well?
That would be my suggestion.
CAO first and then Councillor Coburn.
So through you, Mayor Carlton. I'm deeply invested in this conversation. So I can hear there is some significant concern about our existing policy, and I've heard at least one member of council refer to the CMAA requirements. I don't know if this would be. I'm looking at the CMA requirements right now. The first person that starts the CMA process is the CAO. It's the first person that does it. It's not a subcommittee of council. CAO presents some information back. So it is a staff-driven process that CAMA recommend undertaking. I wonder if council would be inclined to waive the policy or eliminate the policy that we have in place at this point, and as an interim basis, adopt the CAMA Performance Evaluation Guide for CAOs as the guiding document for what will be used for the 2024 performance review of the CAO, and that we would then bring that back to council, outlining the steps. In the meantime, can I suggest, seeing as a process has already been started, rather than submitting the information that you may be ready to submit to council, to the subcommittee, either continue to submit it to the subcommittee and the subcommittee then submit it to the CAO, that the CAO then runs through this, or if you are happy, avoid that middleman and save some time, submit it straight to the CAO, and the CAO can then work through the CMA process as laid out, to bring that back before either a subcommittee of council or council as a whole. So I think the nervousness that's going through my mind is we're creating a policy on the fly here, and it's a policy which is a significant departure from our existing policy and seems to beg and borrow from others. So I wonder if the CMA process is the process that council would like to follow, whether we just simply adopt that process and follow that process.
Okay, Councillor Coburn, I think you had your hand up for a comment.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just considering the CAO's comments as well, and he is quite right. This process typically starts with goal setting by the CAO, but that's not how our policy. That's not how our policy was stated. So I was trying to follow that one and simply remove the staff component from it. Absolutely, the CAO should be developing goals and objectives. But it is our job as a council to decide also what the goals and objectives for our CAO ought to be, based on what we think the needs of the municipality are. So I'm not comfortable. I'm not necessarily comfortable approving a new policy right now when no one on council here has had a chance to even look at that process that the CAMA proposes. I was trying to offer a solution that puts this process back in council's hands where I believe it ought to be, without delaying the process any further, because it is this is a process that's helpful particularly to the employee, and getting us started off on the right footing. It's helpful for everybody. So I don't want to see it delayed. At the same time, I'm not comfortable saying, yeah, let's approve that policy when I would say most of us haven't put eyes on it. Those are just my thoughts.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, Councillor Coburn, I think I might be able to find some middle ground here that might help move this conversation forward without significant delay. So, looking at our policy, the HR manager is actually involved in pretty much every single step of the policy as it currently exists, and Mayor Carlton certainly provided some context behind how that situation arose. So I think I'm hearing that there is limited appetite or no appetite to follow in the existing policy. Performance review processes are fairly typical across the board. So if I can, I'm thinking on the fly here, to not delay the process. If members of council wished to submit what they were going to submit, I believe later this week to the HR manager, if members of council wish to submit that directly to me, it would be fully open and transparent because I would be bringing that back and reflecting that back to council in what I would attempt to be step 1.3 of the CAMA process. And I could bring back a report outlining that performance review process to council at the same time. I believe it would be possible for me to achieve that by March 6th and keep the process on track. So in essence, it would be adopting an interim policy. We wouldn't even be adopting a policy right now because we have no policy in front of us. We would be providing direction to staff to develop a new policy quickly based highly on the CAMA recommendations without delaying the process in the meantime, allowing council to submit their objectives, which would allow me to get a lead on that process, if that makes some sense. I am as acutely keen to move through this as members of council are. I recognise the need for it to be a clear, open and transparent policy. I'm just nervous that this evening we've made it quite clear we're not happy with the policy as it sits to this point in time. I'm just trying to find a way where we go forward in a clear way so that we as staff understand what we are bringing back to council in the future. So I think, I don't know whether that makes some sense, that instead of directing comments to the HR manager this week, you direct them straight to the CAO. The CAO will treat those with confidence and will then reflect them back to council. I will bring back a revised policy based on the CAMA process, and hopefully we'll be able to implement phase 2 of that in closed session later on that evening.
Councillor Coburn.
So thank you, Niall. I think that's definitely one way of tackling this. Are you saying, so this is, I feel like we've gone, we've done a 180 or maybe a 360 possibly. So now you would have us send those to you. So you will be, Niall, collating, because you're going to be getting 7 of these. You're going to be getting all of them and trying to collate them into one document of goals and objectives that you will then present to us in closed session on March 6th.
That's you, Mayor Carlton. Yes, that's pretty much what I was suggesting. The only addition I'd add to that is before presenting those to you in closed session on March 6th, there would be a policy that would be brought forward in open session to clarify that process. So you would have a process in open session and then a conversation in closed session.
That actually to me sounds like much better. I think my reasoning in wanting to stick with the policy that we already had in place was just to keep the process going, and it was the policy knowing that once we had gone through it, then we can correct it to being what it should be. If everybody is comfortable with what the CAO has recommended, then if we can go with that, we don't need this subcommittee either. I'm looking around the room. Any other comments or if everybody's okay with that, then we have a motion on the floor, I think, that we haven't voted on. And we would be changing to. Okay, so what we would need to do is defeat the motion that's on the floor and put a new motion on that is outlined with what the CAO has just said. Everybody's clear? Deputy Mayor Pringle.
Yeah, I think I'm clear. I just want to be sure on, so we're going to defeat the motion on having a committee, but to go
Yes.
to Niall having the information and coming back to all of council.
Yes, with a policy first in open session on March 6th, and then we would go into closed session to discuss all of the goals and objectives that council has directed to the CAO for council as a whole to determine what's the direction we want to be taken in this next year.
Thank you.
So I will call the vote on the motion that's on the floor. All in favor? Opposed? We have to vote one way or the other. All in favor? No hands up. Opposed? Okay. We have defeated that one. Sorry, we had to do the opposite of what we normally do. So now we need a new motion on the floor that the CAO will accept all goals and objectives from all of council, and we'll come back with a policy on CAO appraisal on March 6th, and then we will have a closed session discussion at that time. And for you, those of you online, the clerk and the CAO are having a conversation here, so we can just wait until they're finished. I've actually got into watching that because Dad watches it, so it'll be on in 10 minutes. Do we know what our motion is?
So through you, Mayor Carlton, I think we do. I think what we're doing is we're how do we get rid of a policy? So it's a motion to waive the policy, that the existing policy, and it's direction to staff to bring back a revised policy and implement the first step of that policy.
So then at some point in the process, we'll be passing a bylaw to put in the new policy and repeal the old one. Okay, so our motion needs to waive the existing policy and give the CAO direction to start the performance appraisal process.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, waive the existing policy, direct the CAO to bring back a revised policy based on best practices, including the CAMA guidelines. Has to be the CAO, doesn't it? Direct staff to bring back a revised policy based on best guidelines, including the CMA guidelines, and implement the first step of that policy in advance of it being adopted. If it doesn't get adopted, obviously the subsequent step won't happen.
Okay, is everybody clear on the next steps we're taking then? So I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Winters and Deputy Mayor Pringle. Any further discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Okay. Does any member wish to provide a notice of motion? Seeing none, We are on to the confirming bylaw. The recommendation that bylaw number 2024-013 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council on February 14th, 2024 be read a first, second, and third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Schultes, Councillor Day, is there any discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? Sorry, Deputy Mayor, did you want to discuss something there?
Oh, we're having such a good evening. I thought I may as well say something more. No, next Wednesday, just throwing this out to everybody in council, next Wednesday is committee of the whole, and I don't believe I'll be there. I'm away with work. So I'm just putting that out there to the mayor. If there's any takers that want to run next week's meeting, that'd be more than welcome. I'll be away. I'll probably join in later in the meeting, but I won't be definitely there for 5 o'clock. Just letting you know.
CAO?
So through you, Mayor Carlton, the proceedings of this evening have significantly changed the agenda for next week. So we may actually not need a committee of the whole meeting next week. The agenda was very heavy with stuff which relied on the budget being passed this evening. So we may not need and the things that have cropped up this evening have not got time to come back for you next week. So we may actually not need a committee of the whole meeting next week, but we will confirm that over the next 24 hours.
Okay, good. So one final motion needed to adjourn. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Coburn, Deputy Mayor Pringle, all in favor? That is carried.